Thank you very much, and so delighted to have you. Welcome, Trevor, to In Conversation with Trevor by Blessed Mhlanga.
Thank you, Blessed. I look forward to the conversation, and I'm excited to be able to share with everybody else what you're going to be asking me.
Amazing. Now, welcome to this In Conversation with Trevor, where we go beyond the news, beyond the rhetoric, and we unveil the real truth, the issues that matter. We talk today with an entrepreneur, an influencer, and a media mogul in Zimbabwe, well respected. But today, he is on the hot seat, and he will answer the questions. Now, the first issue, Trevor, that we're going to talk about is how did you arrive here?
Well, it's been a long and exciting journey with a lot of ups and downs. I suppose when I look at it now, you know, a number of people that I've spoken to on this platform say life always makes sense when you look at it, joining the dots from where you are going backward. And journalism is not what I thought I would do. I thought I would be a lawyer. When I was at the university, when I finished my A-levels and was going to the University of Zimbabwe, I missed law by 1 point, and I was absolutely heartbroken because I wanted to be a lawyer. Then fast forward, we at the Zimbabwe Economic Society hosting a conference in Harare at the Monomotapa, and I was invited as part of the group to attend that. And during the deliberations, I think I became loud, and the ZBC crowd that was there, and people like Nigel Chanakira then said, we think that you should host a program on ZBC on economics of change. I ran that show, as you know, people here, my generation might remember that show. It ran for 13 weeks. It was called Economics of Change. I anchored that show on ZBC. So I've worked for ZBC, and it was very successful. It was prime time, around about 7 p.m. rather. When I was doing that show, the owners of the Financial Gazette spotted me. So I was doing the show whilst I was doing my MPhil, DPhil at the University of Zimbabwe. So they spotted me, and they headhunted me. They came looking for me and said, we have just bought the Financial Gazette. We are looking for somebody to come and edit the Financial Gazette and be deputy to Jeff Nyarota. And that's how I got into journalism, and I have never regretted.
Amazing, but you're talking of this journey of what could have been and what is now. How has this shaped your view in the media industry and the body politic of Zimbabwe?
You know, it's interesting that when I joined the Financial Gazette as assistant to Jeff Nyarota, I had very low respect for journalists because I just come from academia, and I had spent so much time in the National Archives doing research. I didn't understand how journalists could overnight write a story and put it out without research. So I was joining this group of people that I was like, oh, they don't do their research and that kind of stuff. And I had already started immersing myself in reading quite a lot. And interestingly, one of the publications that I enjoyed reading was the Financial Gazette, and then the Mail and Garden, whilst I was doing my undergrad work. Then I think 1989, whilst I was assistant editor to Jeff Nyarota, a big seminal event took place in this country where President Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF were intent on imposing the one-party state and one-man rule. Basically, it was the president was pushing that. And some of you recall that I had a conversation with Ibo Mandaza, and Ibo Mandaza did reveal that we wrote a story at the Financial Gazette that resulted in Ibo Mandaza being fired because Ibo spoke against, Ibo said one-party state and one-man rule was a stupid thing. And he was fired from being permanent secretary of Minister of Labour and Manpower Development. So I started getting really passionate about democracy, which is not what I was studying at the University of Zimbabwe. I was studying economic history, socialist economies, and socialist economies, economic history, economic development, and that kind of stuff. But I found myself right in the coalface of Zimbabwean politics. The push towards the one-party state by ZANU-PF, the push towards one-man rule by President Robert Mugabe, and then also fascinating the people that we were working with. I mean, people like Jonathan Moyo, writing articles at the Financial Gazette, people like Ibo Mandaza, and so forth. So I really got involved in the direction that the nation was taking, and I found myself getting an interest in governance issues, social issues, economic issues, issues of justice, fairness, pro-poor kind of policies. And because I had been a lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe in the history of the socialist economies, I was left-leaning initially. So I was a socialist, I was a communist. I was against capital. But how do you become an editor of a Financial Gazette when you are wearing a socialist hat? So I found myself again being transformed into becoming somebody who was pro-market, pro-democracy, pro-accountability. And it's a space that I've occupied for quite some time, and I've been sort of changing, as it were.
Yeah, now this changing aspect is the most interesting one.
Right.
You have been viewed by many as a fighter for democracy, as a voice of reason, coming up with newspapers like the Zimbabwe Independent, the Newsday, and the Standard. But right now, you're one of the most hated men in this country because you have moved politically and are using your influence to try and destroy the opposition. How do you push back to that?
Try and destroy the opposition. Yeah, I think there's people who think that way, but I'm very comfortable in my skin, and this is one thing that I think as Zimbabweans we ought to be familiarize ourselves with, which is when the evidence changes, when the facts change, we ought to always introspect and interrogate our positions. It's not a crime to change your position when you think that the facts have changed, when you think that you've changed, okay? We all change, facts change, events change us. And a man who doesn't change their mind, a woman who doesn't change their mind will break.
But Trevor, are you allowed to change your mind? Because remember, you're not Trevor. You are Alpha Media Holdings. Even though on your Twitter handle you say you're not your newspapers, but you can't divorce yourself from your newspapers, can you?
I do divorce myself from my newspapers completely. I mean, look at Blessed asking me these questions, and quite confident that he will have his job after this, you know. I completely divorce myself from, it's from the newspapers, completely the content. I do not want to have anything to do with content, okay, with editorial. I do not interfere in the editorial stances that the newspapers take. In most instances, I actually go against the positions that the newspapers take. People would wonder why. It's a journey I've walked. One book that influenced me quite a lot is a book by Katharine Graham. Katharine Graham ran the Washington Post when the Washington Post broke some of the big stories around Deep Throat and President Nixon and so forth. And the lesson that I got from there, to cut a long story short, is essentially that prior to Katharine Graham running her father's newspaper, her husband had been appointed by the father to run the newspapers. And the husband, Katharine Graham's husband, used the newspapers for his own personal influence, you know, his networking, his businesses, and so forth. For him, it was basically being a power within the social circles, and he didn't care much about the editorial content and what that would do. When Catherine Graham took over, she had a completely different position, and that position was, I will stand and support what the editors do. I will not interfere. And one of the biggest stories that she broke was the story on Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal. She stood and empowered the journalists. For me, that was a big lesson. But also importantly for me was the fact that we've got 3-4 publications at the present moment, and of course HSTV. If I were to interfere, or the CEO were to interfere, it's a busy life. You'd have to be every day, checking what the headlines are saying and are they covering it properly and so forth. But much more importantly, you're exposing yourself to political influence, which you then exert on the journalists. And I don't think that's right. I mean, for me, that's a very unnegotiable principle as far as editorial interference is concerned. And secondly, I was a journalist at the Financial Gazette for 6 years. And my boss, may his soul rest in peace, my boss was politically connected. And I saw what it is like to have a boss who's politically connected, who's going to, his friends are going to be calling him, and then you get called to go and sit down with them. And I said, I don't want to do this.
But you're politically connected. You're in the park.
I'm politically connected, but I make sure that there are Chinese walls. I used to be in the pack. I resigned about 2 years ago from PEC again because my conscience couldn't. I couldn't sleep well with myself.
But when you walked in, what did your conscience tell you?
When I walked in, my conscience said, Trevor, you need to do this. You've been called. This is a national duty. We should raise our hands for national duty.
Trevor, as a journalist...
Can I finish?
As a journalist, Trevor, you had covered politics.
Yeah.
Where now President Mnangagwa was a political player.
Right.
And very influential, or had a very big hand in Gukurahundi. Mm-hmm. And you knew all this. And this is the man that was a president and asking you to come into park. And your conscience was clear at that point. My conscience was not 100% clear, but it was a question of balancing a couple of things. So, as I've said publicly, I was very clear in my mind. I was persuaded in my mind that this man had the potential to do good things for Zimbabwe. And I say to myself, I've been calling for change, I've been calling for an improvement, and I have an opportunity right now to do exactly that. Why would I refuse and continue to be in the sidelines, as it were? So for me, it was a principled position. Let me help the country. Let me help the president. If the president wins, I win and the country wins. But with time, the things for me that really tipped the scales were the arrest and prosecution of Hopewell Chinono. I'm a journalist. How do I sit around when the government that the president leads is doing this thing? Secondly, the abduction and torture of opposition activists. I decided at that particular moment, it took me about a year to finally make that decision to say, no, I'm going to walk away. I've tried. I've sat with the president. We've sat and said, why should this be done? Why can't these kind of things be changed? So my conscience was uncomfortable going in, but I believed that each one of us must be given an opportunity, a chance to change their mind and see if they have learned from the past. I was absolutely persuaded in my mind that the president had realized the mistakes that he had made regarding Gukurahundi. I was also persuaded in my spirit that the president wanted to make amends for the things that had happened. One thing, for instance, after the president made his inauguration speech, I found missing in the speech was Gukurahundi. And I raised the question mark there. Then I started talking to people. People said, no, the president is determined to work on this thing, but he doesn't want to flag it, but there's a lot of stuff that's what is going to be done. And I believed that. I think sometimes in life, we get to places where, because you want things to work so well,
because you're desperate for things to work. You persuade yourself, let me give the man a chance. Let me work with the man for 1 or 2 years and see what happens. And I did that. And I'm very glad I did that because I learned. I can't now be regretting and saying, oh, I should have gone in. I went in, I did my bit. When it didn't work, I walked away.
So when you sit there and you hear the president saying he's a listening president, what comes into your head?
I know that a lot of people think that he's a listening president, but I've sat next to the president. I've sat where advice was being given, and it took a long time for me to actually, or rather, let me say, I believe that is a listening president. But with time, I begin to realize, no, he doesn't walk the talk. He listens to what he wants to listen to. He's selective in his listening. I think there's one thing, Blessed, there's a difference between you and I sitting down and you listening to me, okay? You are listening. But after that, do you act on what you heard? And I think that's the gap that there is with the president. He's accessible. He sits down, people talk to him, but does he always do the principled things that people want him to do? I think the truth really is that President Mnangagwa is a very stubborn person, okay? He's a very determined somebody. When he decides this is the route that I'm going to take, he sticks with that route. Yes, he might sit around with people and listen to them, but like I want to emphasize the point that there's a difference between listening and taking counsel and taking wisdom and acting on that wisdom based on the positions that you have.
So you managed to give President Mnangagwa a chance to listen to him. But you have a history of not giving a chance to the MDC, which then led by Morgan Tsvangirai, to the MDC then led by Nelson Chamisa, and the Triple C still led now by Nelson Chamisa. You have failed to give them a chance. First you were with ABBA, you were with Mawambo, and you are now supporting Chapman. Why don't you like this guy?
Can I drink some water at this moment? So there's a number of things that you say there, Blessed, which are not true. I gave Chapman an opportunity to say his story. I was partial to some of his views. If you ask him, I actually told him that I don't think I'm going to vote for you. So what you guys, I think there is a problem that we don't analyze. We run away with the noise that people create. So I never supported Chapman. I was very friendly with him. I continue to be friendly. Actually, he sent me a long message about not being able to attend this festival. I believe in talking to everybody. But in Zimbabwe, when you sit down and you talk with somebody, you are supporting them. No, I believe in talking to everybody. I believe in listening to everybody. But listening and talking to everybody doesn't mean that I'm supporting them. So that's Chapman on one side. And Chapman knows that I say to him, I'm not going to vote for you. I'm not persuaded. I'm not convinced that you're the right person. Then, Morgan Tsvangirai, and I've tweeted about this. In my house in Mount Pleasant, I signed a check. Oh, no, I didn't sign a check. My then wife signed a check. One of the first few checks when Morgan Tsvangirai came from a rally in Mount Pleasant. In my house, Morgan Tsvangirai, here's money. You go and do whatever you want to do as MDC president. And I continued supporting Morgan Tsvangirai. But I really got disappointed. The biggest disappointed, I can see you want to stop me. You are not going to stop me now, eh? The biggest disappointment for me was the fallout between Welshman and Morgan Tsvangirai. Twice I was approached by people when I was in South Africa. Trevor, we think you are the person that can talk to the two men. I met with Welshman, Fifth Avenue restaurant. Welshman, people are saying I should talk to you and Morgan. Are you okay with me doing that? Welshman says, oh no, you go and talk to him. But Trevor, don't raise your hopes. I said, what are the issues? Oh, these are the issues, tribalism and that kind of stuff. Nonetheless, I called Morgan, can I come and see you? I went to see Morgan. He was with the guy that used to be deputy to Jeff Nyarota at the Daily News. What was his name?
Bill Saidi.
No, not Bill Saidi. I always forget his name. He's late now. So I went and met with Morgan Tsvangirai. Morgan, what are the issues? You guys are dividing the party. If you lose this election, it's going to be on you, particularly you, Morgan. You are a father. Your disagreement with Welshman, why don't you rise above those disagreements and make sure that you accommodate the people that are fighting below you? Morgan's view, together with the guy that he was with, was, oh no, our structures say that Welshmen shouldn't come in, and there's a bit of tribalism and that kind of stuff. Blessed, when I reversed out of that place that day, I changed my mind about Morgan Tsvangirai. He was not the right person to lead this country. I walked away. I drove from there straight to the airport, back to Johannesburg. I was approached again when Welshmen and them were still fighting. Welshmen, I met at the World Economic Forum in Cape Town. Welshmen, you guys can't continue doing this. I was given permission. I went and saw, and my driver, by the way, who drove me to Morgan Tsvangirai's house is here, and said, she said, you were not even 5 minutes in there. Because I got in there and I discovered that the guy, he was reading a book on why nations failed. But it was clear Morgan thought he was going to win that particular election. I'm terrible with dates, so I will not be able to go back and say what date was. Morgan was not interested. He thought he was going to win. People around him told him that he was going to win, and therefore there was no room for him to negotiate with things. How can I? So I give him a chance, and this is what he does. Run to Nelson Chamisa. Nelson Chamisa, when he's about to take over, he comes to my office, and I've got a picture that I've published. He comes to my office, Mkoma, can I come and see you? He comes to see me. And to run a long story short, I said to him, Nelson, if you come up with the same politics that Morgan had, of tribalism, of being dictatorial, of having a kitchen cabinet and not listening to anybody, I'm not going to support you. Oh no, Mkoma, I've learned and so forth. I'm going to listen to what people are saying. I said, I wish you well, young man. And we continued, we invited him for board dinners and that kind of stuff. But I realized down the line, the young man does not listen to anybody. He doesn't listen to anybody. So I've given him a chance, and he doesn't listen to anybody. I said, I don't want this. So let me finish before you cut me. Then I decided I was going to work with Nkosana more, because I absolutely passionately then believed that maybe a different politics would change this country. People rejected Simba Makoni initially. I was one of the biggest fundraisers for Simba Makoni. I worked with Nkosana Moyo. Things didn't work out. For me, the long and short of that, Blessed, is that I think God has dealt with me. God has said to me, you thought that politics was the way to change this country. It's actually not. And I'm now in a space where I've changed my mind again, and I believe that what we are doing, supporting people that are doing amazing things, supporting people that have got great ideas, creating a platform for changing our conversations, linking the old generation who've done beautiful things with the young generation who are battling to make ends meet, creating a politicization, what's the word? Whatever that word. Cross-pollination of ideas. This country has a potential to grow. That's the beauty that we're seeing amongst the people that are around here. If it's multiplied, it's going to change the country. I've disengaged with politics. I have very little hope for politics changing our country, but that us as individuals have a huge opportunity to change this country, the trajectory of this country, in the spheres that we are. Politics will follow us if we do things right.
Just earlier on, Trevor, you said that President Nelson Mnangagwa is stubborn, listens to nobody. What if I tell you, Trevor, that you are stubborn? Because you, in all the meeting of big politicians you have just thought that they don't listen. Probably it's you who has not been listening.
It's possible, but my not listening does not affect the whole country. Here's the thing. I am very clear in my views. I'm very clear in what I stand for. I'm independent-minded. I'm somebody who looks at principle, values more than anything, more than an individual. Am I stubborn? I think I hold dearly to things that I believe in. And I'm not impetuous. I am not, I don't minimize other people's positions, but I reflect quite a lot before taking positions. But when people are watching you and they don't know how much you agonize before taking position, they think you're being flippant, you're being impetuous and that kind of stuff. But I actually take time to deliberate on the positions that I've taken. And when I've taken them, I don't change them that easily. But even when I change, as I have changed a number of times, it's after a lot of reflection. I think for me, this thing that people should not change their minds is a wrong thing. It leads us to terrible spaces. And I'll say right now here, if Nelson Chamisa were to change his mind and say, I'm going to talk to the president, let's have dialogue, and mean it and do it, this country will change. If the president changes his mind and say, I am the president, I'm going to call that young man, I don't care what I lose, let me sit down and talk to him, we would make so much progress as a nation. But unfortunately, and this is the thing, Blessed, from the question that you asked me, we have this thing that, oh, if I change my mind, what are people going to say? Who cares what people are going to say for as long as you make the right decision? That's the problem. We're so beholden to what the public says, and we are forced into toxic positions because we don't want to change our minds because we are afraid. People are saying, I'm flip-flopping and that kind of stuff. If it's a principled position that you take and you've decided the evidence has changed, and I have changed as an individual, I should change this position, why not?
Trevor, you spoke about funding Morgan Tsvangirai. You also spoke about supporting Nelson Chamisa. And currently, the government has accused your stable, Alpha Media Holdings, and its papers for supporting the opposition and wanting to support regime change in this country. Now you have, on this show, your show, admitted that you've been funding the opposition.
No.
So there is credence in their accusations against you.
There could be, let's put it this way. So Trevor Ncube, as a citizen, signed a check to MDC. I mean, we should be allowed to do that. Trevor Ncube, as a citizen, rallied people around to support Simba Makoni. As a citizen, not the newspapers, not AMH. Again, it's important for us as a nation to be able and to clearly demarcate responsibilities. Trevor is a citizen. AMH is a corporate citizen. AMH has responsibility as a corporate citizen. Trevor has a responsibility as a corporate citizen. The two are entities that can stand, side by side on their own and take position. Let's avoid conflicting positions and conflicting personalities. This is why we are where we are, where churches and pastors, there's no difference between who owns the church and who owns the pastor. It's the same thing. Political parties and politicians is the same thing. The state and the government is the same thing. We need to be people who are passionate and very clear-minded about the importance of the documents that lead to the creation of the organizations that we are in. Rule of law, constitutionality, and that kind of stuff. But we conflate these things. And in our conversations, you talk about Trevor Ncube, you talk about AMH, you talk about HSTV. These are two different things. We should be in a position where we analyze and arrive at a point that this is Trevor Ncube who's done this. It's not AMH that has done that. Can we drill down and find out, was it his salary that did that, or it's AMH that signed the check? That's fundamentally important for us to arrive at a point where we are able to say the president acted in his capacity as the first secretary of the party. He cannot do this as the president of the country. And that kind of clarity is important. Unfortunately, we are a developing nation. And in our walk towards nation building, we've gotten these things so terribly wrong. Hence the mess that we are in at the present moment.
Trevor, we're running
so
out.
when you say a bit of clarification there, right now, I'm not funding any opposition. AMH is not funding any opposition. What we're talking about is what happened in the past. But even right now, I should be, as an individual, be free to support whichever political party that I want. It's my democratic right. And for me, actually, I would love actually for people to know who I voted for and not hide it. But we live in a country where these things are kept as a secret, because if you talk about it, Blessed is going to hold it against you for the rest of your life.
Trevor, you sold part of AMH to someone who has links with the First Family. And this has affected the independent tag of Alpha Media Holdings as a voice for democracy. How do you push back with that?
No, the pushback there for me is very clear. I mean, what you're talking about now in terms of, so first of all, it's a fact. Gerald Mlotshwa is sitting there. We sold shares to Gerald Mlotshwa. Is an investor. Ken Mafukitse is sitting there. He's an investor. The three of us are the only shareholders at Alpha Media Holdings. Gerald is married to the president's daughter. But I think we are very clear. I mean, Gerald is here, he could speak for himself. We are very clear about those Chinese walls, okay? And I would actually challenge you and say there was a perception when the transaction was made that, oh, we're going to be compromised. But I think right now, the consensus overwhelmingly is that the Zimbabwe Independent is independent, the Standard is independent, that data supports CCC. And I love that, Dara. I love that. That's how it should be. But there was. I will admit that there was a time when people figured out, because Gerald Mlotshwa is there, the paper is going to turn pro ZANU-PF and that kind of stuff. It has not happened. Newspapers speak for themselves every day. Newspapers speak for themselves on the basis of the headlines that they have and the content that they have. And over the past 2 years, people have come to realize that HSTV is independent from Trevor Ncube, Gerald Mlotshwa, and Ken Mafukidze, and ZANU-PF. And that you guys run stories the way you want. I never tell you run the story. And all the editors that are here know that we don't tell them what to do. So right now, I think I can boast and say we are the most independent publishing house that there is in the country. We are the most independent broadcasting house that there is in this country. And we will protect that.
But there's not a little bit of time that Gerald has come to you and said, look, Trevor, my in-law is not happy.
Wow. So I'm going to share, Gerald is going to kill me for this, but I'm going to share with this. We had breakfast. I mean, that's the problem with me. I'm very transparent, okay? So we had breakfast with Gerald and Ken, and we as shareholders, but it was not a formal meeting. And Gerald says, I know you guys might be worried that I'm under pressure from the family. I am not, okay? So that's the true of us. He's not, because Gerald is a businessman, and by the way, he can speak for himself. Gerald is a businessman. He's an investor. He's interested in that business being able to turn a profit and getting a dividend from his money. So that's my position. That's Ken's position. We are invested in making sure that this country has a professionally run, principled media house that is invested in nation building, where the shareholders leave the journalists to do what they need to do. Management does what it needs to do. We are aware that an independent media is very important for nation building. An independent media is important for democracy. As businessmen and investors, we want to invest in a country where we believe that we can play a role in strengthening democracy. And we believe that we are blessed in having this asset that has an impact in which direction the country goes. We're very clear the number one thing for us is nation building. The number one thing for us is allowing Zimbabweans in their totality to use our platforms to speak to the powers that be.
But those who have worked with you, Trevor, and those who some people have seen to be close to you, your former editor-in-chief, Dumisani Mhlanga, was at the forefront of talking about your lack of independence in terms of running the media house, and also he was the one who really reported on this aspect. Now, the people that have been close to you talking about this, don't you think that there's a bit of some smoke there? Maybe the fire is smoke, but you have influence.
I have influence. I'm not going to talk to those guys because if you look at where they are right now, with the stories that they've been running, I'm not going to waste my time going there. But one thing I'm going to say is, why do people wait to be fired before they start complaining about lack of editorial independence? How can somebody be employed by the Washington Post and whatever for 10 years, and after the 10 years you get fired and say, oh no, the place was not independent? Why were you there for that long? So I think there are agendas there which I'm not going to waste my time on. It's safe to say that the people that work with me will tell you that I do not interfere, that perhaps the worst thing I can do is to call you Blessed and say, did you notice that there might be a story here? Are you interested in doing it? I think that's the worst kind of interference that I do.
Trevor, you're a Bulawayo boy. Now, there's this issue in Zimbabwe that people in Bulawayo are marginalized. You came from Bulawayo, you went to Harare, and you made it. Let's talk about that as we close.
You know, so again, a lot of people might not know this. My father was Zambian, my mother was Ndebele. So I lived with Ndebele people. I grew up in Matabele and I grew up in Gwanda. So I have a certain affinity to the people down there in Bulawayo. And I understand their grievances. And their grievances have legitimacy. And I think it's important, particularly on the back of Gukurawundi and what happened in Matabeleland, that there be a realization that this nation can never move forward until we speak about those issues. This nation can never move forward until we deal with the grievances, not just from Matabeleland. I mean, during Robert Mugabe's reign, there was a sense that there's a Zulu hegemony. There's now a sense that there's a Karanga hegemony. There's not been a Manika hegemony. There's not been a Ndebele hegemony. I think what's required for us as a nation is to realize that tribalism is not going to get us anywhere. Tribalism is not a building block for the nation. It's important that all constituents that come into forming this nation are listened to. Women are listened to, minority groups are listened to, whites are listened to, the Ndebeles, the Shona, everybody. We have not had nation building in this country. We haven't. And this nation is where it is right now because we haven't had leadership that is invested in making sure that everybody gets a sense that they belong.
And what's your recommendation for the Trevor's Book Club?
I'm reading an amazing book at the moment on Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. It's an important book for those people that are fascinated by how Elon Musk runs 3, if not 4, of the biggest companies in the world. Starlink, I mean, he's the most powerful person when it comes to the satellites that are out there. He's got so much power that Russia and Ukraine were negotiating with him for access to satellite dishes. It's just today, he's put up about 53 satellite stations out there. Professor Mhlanga is here, you might correct me. So there's Starlink that Elon Musk has built. There is Telsa that Elon Musk has built. There's Neuralink that Elon Musk is building. He's an amazing guy. His work ethic and so forth. He's got a dark side of depression and that kind of stuff, and the way that he relates to people is something else. But it's a book that I absolutely strongly recommend. There's also another book on how democracies die. It's a book that we should read. And I would want to pay, for people to pay attention to. Democracy is dying in Zimbabwe in the opposition. Democracy is dying in Zimbabwe in the ruling party. Democracy is dying in Zimbabwe amongst us, the common people, okay? Because we're not informed about the politics and how we make our decisions. We get swayed by personality cults, not principles, not values, and as a result, our democracy is just being messed up with. Democracy is being killed in Zimbabwe because the majority of people have lost confidence in democracy delivering them the kind of future that they're looking for. So those two books are books that are... Oh, and one other book, I can't remember the title though, but it's a great book on what we owe each other. And for me, that's a powerful book because we all in this room owe each other something. And that something is we owe each other a social contract that makes sure that we are all bound by a social contract that takes care of the young, the aged, the disabled, the pensioners, and so forth. So that would be the third book that I'll recommend.
So this is in conversation with Trevor. This was conversation with Trevor, Dara B. But just, I think people would want to just know a little bit. You were with Chabangu, the famous Chabangu, recently.
Yeah.
What is your view about him after having that conversation with him? And I mean, you need to look forward to this in conversation with Trevor, where he speaks to the infamous or famous Chabangu, who has single-handedly brought the opposition down with a pen and a paper that carries Nelson Chamisa's face.
You know, for me, so I spoke to Chabangu. I spoke to Chabangu 2 days ago. The show is coming out in 2 weeks' time. You know what I've discovered with sitting down with most of these people around here? Until you've sat down with somebody and spoken to them, until you've sat down with somebody and broken bread with them, you don't know them. You'll never know somebody by reading bits and pieces and watching videos on YouTube and whatever. I sat time and spoke to the man. It's a conversation worth listening to. My thing there would be, we all, and this is the reason why we've got this get together. We all need to listen to each other so that we understand each other. We all need to listen to each other so that we are not afraid of each other. Fear stops us from knowing each other and understanding each other. We need to speak to each other as a nation.
Amazing. Now, this has been a great honor and privilege for me to sit down here and host the host on this in conversation with Trevor here at the Ideas Festival in Nyanga. And I just hope that we all enjoyed this and, you know, took some nuggets out of it. I am, as usual, Dara, and I was interviewing Dara this evening here at Trollback, and I still have my job. Thank you very much, Trevor. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for such a brilliant conversation. And right now we'll be getting into our ideas storming session. And this is a session where we'll be bringing together all the ideas based on this conversation. So each one of you can ask any key question or add to an idea that you thought could have come out of this conversation. So I will give the floor to, okay, I'll start with Simon. Do we have a mic?
Is somebody over there?
And then I'll follow with Ryan.
Thank you, Trevor, for a brilliant presentation on the various aspects of the economy. My question is, normally when we talk about the state of our economy, we tend to almost like 100% apportion the whole issue to government. The government and the politicians. So in your view, the non-state actors, those who are not in government, do you think we have what it takes at the moment to drive and actually make a big impact, like what you said, that you realize that we can do more if we focus on bringing our ideas together as individuals instead of focusing on the politics. Are we organized enough as the non-state actors? I will give you examples. We have ZNCC, which is an umbrella body of people in business. We have got CZI, which is another one. We have got employers. We have got so many of these organizations. Is there some strategic matrix that brings together all these ideas and all these bodies together, so that we can then move forward? So that even if the government fails to do something, we can still drive forward.
Okay.
So, because when we talk about these things and strategic things, we sometimes forget the strategic architecture of the economy. Are we really organize this landscape? Do we sing with one voice, or we are also competing within a space that we are competing, and we are also operating in our own fields?
Thank you, Simon. Mr. Ncube, would you like to take a few questions?
I think I forget, so let me deal with that. I think you raise an important question, and for me, my observation has been that people who should be leading ZNCC, CZI, the Institute of Directors and so forth, have backed off from that responsibility. Those organizations don't have the integrity, the caliber of people that should be leading those institutions, because people have stepped back. We have a different kind of leader that is stepped in there. And unfortunately, you find in most instances, they're not the kind of people that should be in those positions. We require, for me, this is something that I reflect on, leadership in the private sector. There's no leadership in the private sector. Principled, courageous leadership in the private sector, that is not there. We have people, the private sector is timid. It is not playing its role. The church is timid. So we have a leadership crisis all across. But here is the thing. I mean, talking to the people that are around in this room who have been on the platform, the beautiful ideas that they have, the beautiful execution that they have, the precision with their ideas, for me has just been like, wow, this is amazing. But still, the economic superstructure, the policies and so forth, is frustrating those people. The young people are disengaged, okay, from ZNCC, CZI and so forth. Nobody's listening to these young people because, Vana and so forth. But these young people, some of them are sitting in here, they've got amazing ideas that could change this country if only they were given an opportunity to do that. The people in CZI and ZNC and that kind of stuff, they're interested with Madara, who are in politics because of what Madara can give them. Okay, I think for me, sadly, I think the truth is that the rot in ZANU-PF, the rot in CCC has affected our entire society. I keep on saying that we as a society are broken. But people say, oh no, speak for yourself, you're broken. Yes, I'm broken, but you're also broken. And it's about time that we owned up to that. Let's own up that we're broken and that we need to be fixed and begin the work of fixing ourselves. So I think, my brother, the question that you ask is a leadership issue, which transcends a lot of things. People are scared to speak out. People are scared to go. I mean, I'm not going to embarrass one person who's here who says, we meet with the president, and the people are saying before the president comes in, we're going to say this and that. The president talks. Afterwards, any questions? Z. The president walks out. Papa, and the president is gone. So we don't have people who are courageous, principled, who stand for stuff and are going to say, Mr. President, I think this is wrong because of ABCD. It's not what you call jambanja. It's not jambanja. It's sitting down and reasoning with your leaders. That is not happening, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ryan. And just please make your questions to the point. Thank you.
Thanks, Mhlanga. So my question, Trevor, I think one thing that I drew from the conversation was on your pushback on what you believe in. And I through my whole experience, traveling all around the world, one thing that holds the country together is the ability for a citizen to speak their mind, right? And as Chile says, it's as old as 400 BC. Truth is the first casualty of war, and truth is our own perception of the world, right? But then it also pulls apart in what Shakespeare describes in Macbeth as, self-perception is impossible. You're a citizen with a platform. How do you reconcile supporting what you believe in and if I may say, moving or supporting what the majority says? It doesn't matter whether the majority is right, but how do you reconcile the two between believing in what you eternally believe in, even if it's wrong, even if it's right, and what the majority believe in, right or wrong?
That's a very powerful question. And I think my answer is going to be very short in that. It's a tension that is not easy to negotiate. But I've also come to believe that the majority is not always right. And history has proven that. That people that have started things and were laughed at by the majority ended up regretting and following them. Okay? So I am not worried about being in a minority. And I don't think I've got the power that people say I have. But I understand maybe because I'm privileged. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. But I truly believe that if all of us had positions or principle that we're passionate about and held on to those positions, because at the end of the day, to go to the theme of why we're here is ideas compete. The best ideas win. Let's create a vibrant marketplace of ideas, Ryan, where your idea and my idea, go head to head. And your idea proves itself better than mine, and you patent it. So I think the bottom line is, really and truly, the majority is not always right.
Thank you so much, Trevor. That was so inspirational and great job, Darabi. Mine is especially I took a lesson. I've got an impression and I've got a question. So my first lesson from Trevor's interview is that leave anything the moment you stop representing who you truly are. And my impression is that you do agree with the president to some degree, because now that you then deviated from politics and disengaged and you're here, it means you believe that you can no longer live in life. And then my question is, then give us your idea. What would you do if you were the president in regards to the ground?
In regards to the ground? Okay. I think there is need. I think the easiest, the one thing that people in Matabeleland are crying for is, we are sorry. We messed up. That in itself, you have no idea what it will do. For somebody to say, we are sorry because we did A, B, C, D. Right now, nobody's taking responsibility. Okay? We have seen what's happened elsewhere in the world where that kind of thing happens. I mean, if you followed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you will have seen the videos of people say, I think today I'll sleep better because I know who killed my father. Okay? And they have apologized in front of me. It's a big step towards closure. Okay? Unfortunately, in this country, people in Matabeleland have not been allowed to begin that closure. So it's the apology. It's an investment towards making sure that those who died are identified, their survivors get birth certificates and all those key documents that they need, and that there be some form of restitution. Okay? But also, for me, it's not, we don't end there. We then say, all the other seasons of violence that we've had, where people's hands have been cut in Mashonaland East and whatever, we need as a nation to draw the line in the sand and say something of this nature is never going to happen. Here is what I say, that, and actually we need to revisit this thing to the liberation struggle. We don't know what happened in the liberation struggle. Okay? We don't know who killed who was Jiba and that kind of stuff. People are coming up now claiming some of them really had no role in the war. Why am I going into the war? The people that prosecuted the war are some of the people that were responsible for Gukuraunda crimes and continue to be responsible for some of the things that are happening at the present moment. We need, as a nation, to face ourselves in the mirror, draw the line in the sand and say, this will never, ever happen again. Okay? It's part of nation building, and it's part of us being able to move forward and forgive each other as a nation. Yes, nyika inovakwane venevayo, but everybody must be involved. Every member of the family must be involved.
Trevor is saying every member of the family must be involved. I'm just thinking about, I was fortunate to be in Rwanda a few weeks ago, and one thing I noticed is just how clean that country is. And even in the township, I didn't see one piece of paper on the ground. And, coming back to Zim, it's been quite a shock. Especially even in Bulawayo, where I come from. And one of the things I was thinking about is Nehemiah, where everyone just built the wall in front of them. So what would that look like if we, in Zimbabwe, people just fixed the road in front of them and cleaned the street in front of them? Just a simple thing, because I feel like how can you get pride and even believe you can change a nation when you walking in dirt every day?
So for me, I'll go beyond that, because cleaning is actually attending to the symptoms. I think for me, it's about do not litter. Okay? Do not litter. And it's, why don't we, and this is where I have a problem with your guy, why don't we have the opposition talking about we need to have cities cleaned, okay? But you need to clean, you need not litter. Why don't, the president had days where he would clean. That's attending to the symptoms. What the president ought to be talking about and the opposition is we need not litter. My brother, I was in Rwanda.
Does it not start with cleaning right now? I think it's a double-edged sword. You've got to do both.
You can do both.
Right now, we've got rubbish everywhere.
I
Just
agree.
clean it up,
Yeah.
and then we send the message.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I think it's important not to put the cart before the horse. Do not litter, first of all. It's a mindset. To go to your example, my brother, I sat face to face with Kagame, and I said to President Kagame, why I cannot keep my yard as clean as Kigali? How do you do it? He walked me through his reasoning. He says, the state of the nation, the litter around, is a reflection of what's in our mind.